The Power Lunch with Mark Sutcliffe is brought to you by Waterford Retirement Community. Discover resort-style living for seniors in Ottawa's South End. Visit waterfordretirement.com. The stories that are happening right now and the viewpoints that give perspective. This is the Power Lunch on 1310 News. It's a fresh take on what's trending in the news on Ottawa today with Mark Sutcliffe.
Our guests today on the Power Lunch are Michele Austin from Summa Strategies and Keenan Weller from Live Work Play. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great to see you. And we've been hearing on the news about Air Transat and the hearings continuing, and maybe there was a plane that bumped them back in terms of priority, and we'll continue to follow that. But I wanted to ask you, if you had been one of the passengers stuck on one of those Air Transat flights last month, what would it take to get you to fly with them again? A, the $400 in compensation that was offered was sufficient. B, free flights to anywhere in the world. Or C, I would never get on that airline again. Michele?
Never would I get on that airline. I try not to fly anything but WestJet and Air Canada just because of the fear of having that happen to you, because you hear all of these terrible horror stories. And it's not just airlines, of course, it happens everywhere else. But, I mean, that whole story is totally ridiculous. And there's nothing I don't think Air Transat could do to get me back on there.
Okay.
Now, you said you fly Air Canada and WestJet. Do you fly Porter as well?
I don't fly Porter anymore because, you know why? You end up getting stuck, at least I do. Fog. If you fly early, which I like to do, you end up getting stuck and you get rerouted to Pearson anyway. So what's the point? So actually, I've stopped flying Porter to Toronto. Maybe I'd fly to Moncton or something else.
Yeah, but nothing against Porter. It's just the circumstances of where they're flying out of.
And this is a condition of circumstances, right? Where, well, it's probably a lot more.
But I think what you're alluding to, and I've flown Porter many times. I had one issue with the fog one time. I also have a great Justin Trudeau story about flying Porter, by the way. But I've flown Porter many times. I had an issue with the fog one time, which was crazy because they were also saying, oh, well, we could put you on a flight home tomorrow morning instead of this afternoon, and it was 3 o'clock in the afternoon. You know, so I ended up just going out to the airport and getting on a WestJet flight. Otherwise, my experience with Porter, and I'm talking dozens and dozens of flights, has been terrific.
Well,
so I'm still good with Porter. But I had one fog-related experience out of many, many positive ones. But
see, I get fogged in all the time there. I just don't fly it anymore.
Yeah, that doesn't happen to me. But I think what you're getting to, though, is that there are these charter companies.
Right.
And the experience you're going to have on a charter flight sometimes is not the same because they have a smaller fleet and delays kind of back up on themselves more quickly. They don't have the same priorities as the bigger airlines at the airport. So I think, I'm not an expert on this, but in my own experience and in talking to other passengers, you're more likely to have some kind of delay or incident with a charter than you are with one of the main airlines that has a huge fleet.
Yeah, I've seen Sunwing deny that kind of thing, but I don't know, the evidence seems to be, and I've had that experience too. I think I'd take if I could get the flight to anywhere in the world, I'd take the flight and then I'd never fly with them again.
Right. You would use the compensation.
Yeah, I'd take my shot at that one flight to anywhere in the world, and then I'd say, and I'm still never going to fly with you again because I'm never going to forget. My legs still hurt from this experience. And, yeah.
But I bet you a lot of people are in that position of, look, if there's some free stuff coming to me here, I will I will take all I can get from you. But then when that's over, I'm done with you.
But it's really interesting because in other service industries in the world, when you look at Uber, when you look at Airbnb, the hotels and the taxis, not so much in Ottawa, but the taxi companies have had to improve their service, right? Because they're competitive with these lower fare carriers. The airline service is completely impervious to it. They have changed nothing. You still pay the big companies pay to get access, and I think you see it reflected in their price, but you also see it reflected in the service. So, I mean, this is another indication for me that the airline industry really has to step up. I mean, the whole situation's bonkers.
But it won't.
No, I don't think it has to. It's not
because the reality is, I don't think I think when I go and book a flight online, the brand of the airline means absolutely nothing to me. It really is, how can I get there on my timetable? Who's flying planes that will match my schedule? What's the shortest trip that I can take with the fewest layovers and the shortest travel time? And what's the lowest price?
Yep.
It's not who do I know has a reputation for providing good service?
Right, until they see it in the bottom line that customers are actually, we're making money by offering good service. And if you look at what is driving all the marketing, it's price. So that's, I think, part of the consumer is to blame. That if that's what we want, that's what we're getting.
Exactly. And that is what we want. Because I don't think if somebody went out there and marketed, we've got the best service, but it's going to take you longer to get there and you're going to have to pay a little more, I don't know if that would work.
You could fly Emirates,
I think
but
people would
that's
still,
pretty pricey. Yeah.
I think people would still default to the cheapest and fastest route.
Mostly.
Those are the bigger priorities.
Right, and they're
flying.
looking for they're not always thinking about the flight, right? They're thinking about the destination.
Yeah.
True.
And some of those.
This is just a way of getting there.
Exactly.
And it's an ordeal you put up with.
Not me. Maybe others, but I won't do it.
Good for you.
So you are brand sensitive.
It's only almost, I would think, in air travel. I can't take it when you get to the airport. You've made all those. And I have a big family. You get 5 of us at the airport, and they say, "Sorry, no pilot." So you have 8 hours to kill, and which has happened to me numerous times. I think it's happened to most travelers. I can't. My time is too important, and I want to have control over my itinerary. So maybe not my destination. So I always fly Air Canada or WestJet.
Very quickly, my Justin Trudeau story. I was flying Porter from Toronto to Ottawa, and I got on the ferry, and this was a few years ago. This would have been even before the Patrick Brazeau fight. So Justin Trudeau at the time was a Liberal MP, a high-profile Liberal MP, but a Liberal MP. Nobody thought, oh, in a couple of years, this guy will be Prime Minister of Canada. So he's on the ferry from Toronto to the island airport, and of course, a few people are saying hello and smiling, but for the most part, they're leaving him alone. And we get to the terminal, and I'm in line behind him, and he goes up to the counter, and they process him, and it was a pretty quiet day, so I'm the next person in line, and I end up going to the service provider there, the clerk, the attendant, after she has just served Justin Trudeau, and he's now gone on his way to security to get on the flight. And she was so starstruck. I've never seen anybody, honestly, I could have given her your passport and I would have gotten on that plane. Because she was completely agog at having just met Justin Trudeau.
I think I was on the other end of that.
he was not even the Liberal leader at the time.
I know.
He was a member of Parliament, and he had this effect on
I saw him get on the ferry on the other end. Maybe it's the same trip. And the same thing happened. A very serious-looking businesswoman was not paying attention to anyone. Then she poked me in the ribs and said, "Is that Justin?"
Yeah.
I was like, oh, my gosh, this means something. I don't know, but big things could be coming.
Yeah, and in retrospect, that was a clue, obviously, to his star power, right?
Yeah.
I mean, she was a puddle, basically.
Wow.
You know, she was almost
he's
ineffective at her job.
He's polite and very charming. I mean, I'm a well-known
He's a great person in person.
And he's so kind to me. I always say that. He's so nice. I try and be on my best behavior.
Yeah, when you meet him in person, he's lovely.
He's manners, charming.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Very likable.
Likable human, yes.
Yeah. All right. Do you accept and agree with the research that shows the Salvation Army's proposed community hub will create economic benefits for Vanier? A, yes, I think the center is good for the community. B, there may be economic benefits, but they don't outweigh the negatives. Or C, I'm skeptical because you can make the numbers demonstrate anything you want. Keenan?
Okay, full disclosure, I was part of a group of people that gave the Salvation Army an award last year for a program they run that supports people with disabilities that we help, and it's money-wise, it's wonderful. And so maybe a little biased. I have a lot of trust in that particular organization as doing good work at an efficient way for our community. I don't put too much stock in the consultants' numbers about what the economic impact will be. That's just remains to be seen. There's no doubt it's going to, there'll be more there than there was, so obviously it's going to be better just from an economic analysis. From a social analysis to the question of, on balance, it really remains to be seen. It could be a positive impact. There's a lot more that goes on there than just a shelter. And I think there's other social institutions that have gone into that neighborhood that had a positive effect, and they were also feared. So a lot remains to be seen, but the overall balance, I don't think anyone at this point can tell us that answer.
Michele?
I'd agree. I don't know if you were going for the peace, love, and understanding theme today, but I feel like that's the underlying tone. But I think that this report is too little too late, frankly. I agree with you completely. I don't think those numbers will hold up. And I think it's too late that they released this report. I don't know where it was earlier, which is the whole problem with this whole process, right? The consultation, the information, all of that is missing. So, of course, I would be hopeful that there would be some jobs for everyone, whether it be the clients and the people working there, and it would be a positive experience. I really quite like the model that the Salvation Army has here, and I've seen it work in child advocacy, and I think it works well. But we're past that, I think, in terms of this whole process, and there's just so many things went wrong from a public relations perspective and from a community building perspective that while these numbers are nice, I don't know if I believe them.
Yeah, it's not about winning the argument anymore, right? Unfortunately, it's not about making the case, because you have to build the case and make the case at an earlier stage in the process. If you're making it now after there's already significant opposition and people feel like they weren't consulted, it's too late to suddenly start bringing up good points.
I read the comments under those stories, and basically there is nothing that report could have said that would have changed most people's minds. It's too late, like you said.
Yeah, and that's why you see there are good examples of projects where they do the consultation work, they engage the community, they do it early, they go through, they spend a lot of time in town halls and public meetings, and they go through, they put that time in so that when they get to this point, they have spoken to people, and the people don't feel left out. They don't feel left out of the process and automatically resist something because it seems like it's being forced upon them.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's the community building aspect of this has disappeared. And I also think that the thing that was missing too was buy-in through maybe a pilot program or a better understanding of what was already going on in the community from the Salvation Army's perspective. But like I said, I think that it is a noble undertaking. It's approaching things differently for this community in terms of who their clients will be. But the broader Vanier community just feels so left out, ignored, disenfranchised, and unhappy that I think just it's going to be such a difficult.
Yeah. I lived in that area for a while, and they've got, as we all know historically, a good case for any time there's a problem, we'll move it to Vanier, or the way we do our policing, and historically the way we've allowed crime in certain areas and not in others. And
Right.
They just are seeing this as another example. It probably is not. But that's the context, and you have to be sensitive to that and prepare for it.
All right, coming up, we're going to talk about what happens to our education system if only 50% of grade 6 students are meeting the provincial standard in math, and also what is the greatest legacy of Diana, Princess of Wales. More to come on the Power Lunch on 1310 News.
You're listening to Ottawa Today with Mark Sutcliffe on 1310 News and Rogers TV. Mark will be right back. Welcome back to the Power Lunch on 1310 News. Time for another bite into the big topics of the day.
Our guests today on the Power Lunch are Michele Austin from Summa Strategies and Keenan Weller of Live, Work, Play, who is also an enormous Ottawa Redblacks fan, and they're playing tonight in Montreal with a chance to go into first place, just like that.
How do you like that?
Yeah.
The big smiles, everyone in their our shirts around the city. Things change quickly, I'll tell you.
Yeah, they change quickly in part because the CFL East is abysmal this year.
Not the best, but I like that. I think, as long as we make the playoffs, we will be competitive with any other team.
It's great from the point of view of the Ottawa Redblacks, but the Toronto Argonauts would be tied for last place in the Western Division.
True.
And they would be tied with Saskatchewan, and the Saskatchewan Roughriders have played 8 games. The Argonauts have played 10.
True.
So really, they'd be in last place in the CFL West, and they are in first place in the CFL East.
Look, my Steelers have to play the AFC North every year. It's unfair. Divisions are divisions. Things will change.
Yeah.
Move on.
Only one team in the CFL East has scored more points than it has given up, and that's Ottawa.
That's Ottawa.
Yeah. They could be in first place tonight. They could also end up in third place if they lose. Big game against the Alouettes tonight at 7:30. Let's get back to our questions. And what should be done about the education system if only 50% of grade 6 students are meeting the provincial standard in math? A, overhaul the curriculum. B, reward teachers based on performance. Or C, leave it alone for now and see if the trend continues. Michele?
As you know, I always say this on the show. I have 3 kids in public school, and this story makes me just lose my mind. How is this okay? I think I read in the Citizen, I think somebody said, a teacher said, we hope to bring those scores up. Gosh, well, if anybody can do anything about it, dear teachers, that would be you. I mean, there's so many things wrong. The standardized testing brings everybody down to the standard. It doesn't bring people up above the standard. I wonder, I look at what my kids are learning in school. I wonder about the 3 R's, reading, writing, arithmetic, if there is any focus on language arts and that kind of thing. But nobody cares, I don't think. Can they code? Probably, but they've learned to do that on their own time. We're still university isn't something that people achieve or strive for these days. It's something that people expect to have happen. I just think that there's so much more we should do. My number one thing I think we should do for schools is make them totally competitive. That it doesn't matter where you live. You can go to any school you want. You pay $10 to get on the bus, off you go. And that would certainly, I think, force teachers and school boards to have generally bring up the standards to attract children to their schools.
But what if we all wanted to go to the same school?
Yeah, see the passion
well,
there.
Good. I hope that's the case, because then other schools will say, well, what are we doing wrong? Why is it?
Right.
And that's not
No, but
gonna
how would
be-
you sort that out? Who would get to go to the school?
The market would have to sort that out. You'd have to register, like people stand in line for junior kindergarten. I mean,
Right.
let's be perfectly honest. People stand in line to register in schools still in Ottawa,
Yeah.
especially junior.
And there is still
kindergarten
that
and
thing
senior.
of lining up. I don't know exactly the circumstances, but
There's
there are people
transfer
Yeah,
deadlines.
people who line up for the transfer deadline
Right.
to get their child moved to a
Right,
specific
and a lot
school.
of that
Yeah.
depends on the principal as well. And a lot of families wouldn't be able to do that. They wouldn't be able to move their kids around. Some people move mountains right now to move their kids around. So why not
Yeah.
open it up?
That's why I think, though, the competitivization, is that a word, of education, oh, that's bad, I'm talking about education, I made up a word. I think that's the challenge, though, because then you get the families that are most resourced and good at that kind of thing. I run a nonprofit. I know how this works. So when we have fee-for-service, which is becoming increasingly popular, people who really know what they're doing have money. That's who we get. And families that don't get it.
Right.
And so then you get even more diversity in the negative
So what's your
way.
solution?
Oh, I'm more like the Michael Moore goes to visit Norway, and they're not doing math anything really teaching the way we are. I went through teachers college, thought I wanted to be a teacher, hated working in the school, hated the curriculum, and the time I had in practice teaching taught math completely differently, which is probably why I would have been fired anyways, even if I'd stayed in the field. But
Nobody gets fired.
I think Michelle's comment, though, about the coding, they know how to code, but they probably learned that on their own. I'm like, okay, so we're still doing curriculum like it's 1950, and it isn't. And so teachers are just delivering, unless we can say you're failing to deliver the curriculum, it's not their fault, actually. If they're doing their job, which is right now, deliver this curriculum, and the kids aren't passing the test, the problem is we're not teaching properly, and teachers, I would know from personal experience, they can't just do it differently on their own. So we've got a massive problem with how we teach, period.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that.
Yeah, I'm amazed, though, because when they introduced the standardized testing and they said they were going to compare schools based on this and see, I just assumed that the focus of teaching would be on getting kids to pass those tests, and that other things would pay a price for that. And in fact, that hasn't happened.
No.
I thought, okay, teachers are going to start saying, okay, well, I'm just going to make sure that all the kids in the class pass that test, even if it means they don't learn all this other stuff they need to learn, and that isn't what has happened.
Because there's no impact. Like, this is, I take what you're saying, but it's not like kids are going elsewhere, right?
What's the outcome?
Right, and I take the time to look at my schools and see how they're doing, and I balance all of these things. Well, do I have time to drive my children to school and pick them up every day? Sadly, I don't. But, I mean, I just don't think that it has contributed anything to people shopping for schools, which is already happening. If you have time and ability to do that, or to delivering better results to children and communities. And the other thing that I find that teachers do is they plow through the testing curriculum as fast as humanly possible, shelve it by February, go on to what they want to do, and so by the time the testing comes, the kids are like, I'm sorry, what is it that we're supposed to be tested on? So
Interesting.
that's my experience.
I go back to what works. If you look at Norway again, the poorest communities have beautiful schools, and those kids are doing just as well as everybody else. So.
What is the greatest legacy of Diana, Princess of Wales? A, helping to bring the British monarch into the 20th century, at the end of the 20th century. B, the impact she had on many British and international causes. Or C, her children.
I'm going with B and C.
Sure.
I know we talked about this.
Yes.
The older I get, the more I think that your children are always your legacy.
Sure.
And some are lucky to have them, some not so much. But, I think you had a guest on who was talking about that image of her reaching out to AIDS, people who had AIDS, and reaching out to communities that were generally considered to be unworthy and untouchable, and I think she did a wonderful job there. But I think her success is her children, and even though she wasn't around a long time to help them, certainly her legacy, which is probably stronger for her children than anybody else who would lose a parent, to have people around to support you and with the memory of that parent is extremely important.
Yeah. Keenan?
I think the legacy was the miracle that people are still interested and the monarchy is still popular, because I think if we go back to right around when she was on the scene, it was kind of people saying, I don't get these rich people that are born into power and status, and maybe we should get rid of this. And she came on the scene and changed that narrative, and it taught a big marketing lesson to the royals that, wow, we better start getting real and finding ways to be with the people and crank up our popularity. And it's been hugely successful. Now they have a new generation that's following that pattern, and that's maybe a little cynical, because I'm sure she was totally genuine. I was a young lad at the time and quite starstruck myself for whatever reason. I just remember that she connected, and that's what the monarchy learned. We need to connect.
All of the evidence seems to suggest, we don't know, of course, but all of the evidence seems to suggest that both William and Harry are remarkably well-adjusted, given their circumstances, remarkably well-adjusted, mature individuals who are contributing in enormous ways. And that is a credit to her and, frankly, to Prince Charles, who obviously is a good dad as well, for all his faults.
Right, and I think that her death also forced the royal family to tackle a lot of these issues head on.
Definitely.
Exactly.
And which other families maybe don't have, don't experience if there's a death in their family. They're not forced to deal with these, but they were. And the kids are better for it. We're all better for talking about it, I think, and bringing what's known in the United Kingdom as the firm.
Right.
Agreed.
All right.
Maybe that's the legacy. Yeah, that's good.
Keenan, Michele, thank you.
Thank you.
Great to see you. That's it for the Power Lunch. Coming up, Dr. Rob Thacker will talk about some big science stories, and still ahead, singer-songwriter Graham Nash.
The Power Lunch with Mark